Hello, Matthew Bell here. Prepaying funeral costs or pre-arranging for funeral plans can be an important aspect of final expense planning. In a previous video, I went through some of the average or expected costs that a person might run into with respect to final expenses. Some of those included hospital and medical expenses, funeral, burial, crematory expenses, and also attorney and court costs. But here I'd like to survey the funding option of prepaying for a funeral versus using proceeds from a life insurance policy. So we're going to kind of look at some of the pluses and minuses of each one. This video is for general informational or entertainment purposes only. I'm not actually giving anybody specific financial advice, and I would encourage you to investigate the various options that are available to you and your family to see which one may be best for you. You can feel free to consult with experts in your area if you need further and personalized advice. But here we're going to look at the difference between prepaid funerals and life insurance policies. So in an important sense, a prepaid funeral plan is like a life insurance policy in the sense that you might invest some lump sum or some set of installment payments into a prepaid plan that is designed to give you a particular output in terms of money. So for example, you might select a $10,000 prepaid funeral plan, or you might select a plan that covers a particular constellation of services that you have prearranged in advance. In this case, the money that you pay, whether as a lump sum or in installments, would go to a funeral home, or it would go to a particular company that the funeral home works with to provide these sorts of pre-need or prepaid funeral plans. Now, some people find this kind of option very attractive for a number of reasons. Number one, they can literally pre-arrange their own services. They can select what types of services they want to accompany their funeral. They can select burial plots and the like of this. And the idea here is that they can take the stress off of whatever relatives may need to do that in the event of a person's passing. So if you knew you were going to pass and it would fall to sons or daughters or grandchildren to actually handle those arrangements, and you wanted to take that strain off of them, a prepaid or prearranged funeral is sometimes used for that purpose. Another advantage is that you can deal with your preferred funeral home. So if you have a particular place that you would definitely like to handle your funeral arrangements, then by prearranging it or prepaying it in advance, you can try to guarantee that that funeral home is going to be the one that is utilized for your final expenses. Another attractive component is that by prepaying it, in theory, you can lock in some of the prices in today's money and account for increases that may occur in the future. Now, I'm going to put an asterisk on that, and we'll come back to it in a minute. But basically, people do this for peace of mind. They want to take the stress off of their heirs, their beneficiaries, their survivors, and they want to just take care of this expense and not have to worry about it. However, prepaying final expenses in this way to a funeral home may not be the wisest course of action, and it may not be the best use of money. So some possible drawbacks are that the funeral home or the company that they are associated with may not invest the money that you give to them in the best kinds of vehicles. They may lose money on the money that you give to them. Now, this may not matter to you directly, because if they are still able to honor their portion of the agreement, you might think, well, it doesn't matter where the money goes. But the idea here would be that if you could do better with your money invested somewhere else, it may be the wiser use of your money than to give it to a funeral home to have it mishandled. But a more serious concern is that the funeral home may actually go out of business prior to your passing. In this case, it may be difficult or impossible to get the services that you prepaid for or to get a refund. Additionally, your prepaid funeral plan may or may not include cost of living adjustments, which means in part that even if you've prepaid, a subset or a portion of the bill may still be owed by whoever it is that has to actually deal with the funeral home at the time of your passing. Some of the major concerns with prepayment of funeral costs through a funeral home include the lack of portability. So for example, if you were to relocate to a different state, and your prepaid funeral is with a particular home in one state and you move to another state, it's again not clear whether or not you're going to be able to utilize that prepayment or be able to get a refund or get money back on that. Some plans may be unalterable once they are in place. And as we said, there's a related concern of possibly not being able to change your mind, get your money back. There may or may not be a cash value component to these funeral home plans, and you may or may not be able to access it. Sometimes there's an additional question of what happens if there's extra money that's not needed for your funeral expenses. Does that go to beneficiary, or does the funeral home keep that money? A final consideration, although it's not specific to prepaid funeral plans, is that if your beneficiaries, your heirs, your survivors are unaware of the fact that you've prepaid and they go ahead and make arrangements with a different funeral home, it may be a waste of your money to have prearranged or prepaid your funeral. So the moral there is that you want to make your beneficiaries, your heirs, your potential survivors aware of any plans that you make so that something like that doesn't occur. But prepaying through a funeral home is not the only option. Some people use life insurance for the same basic purpose, namely to discharge whatever costs are associated with final and burial expenses. In other words, life insurance can be a surrogate for prepaying your funeral plan. Now, some advantages or potential advantages in dealing with an insurance company is that the insurance companies may be larger companies than the company that is running the funeral home. Now, this can be seen as an advantage in the sense that they may have the ability to leverage costs to provide a more discounted rate for premium payments. They may also have less of a chance of going out of business, particularly if they have high ratings. There are rating companies like AM Best and Standard & Poor's, Fitch's, Moody's, and the like of these that rate various different insurers, and you should consult with these, and these statistics are available online. You should consult some of these before you make a decision in terms of dealing with a particular insurer, but likewise you should consult with sources like the Better Business Bureau and other rating organizations to try to determine whether a funeral home is reputable as well. Insurance policies may have cost of living adjustment riders, or if the company is a participating company, that is to say, if the company pays dividends, then in some cases the dividends will actually help the policy keep pace with cost of living adjustments. So you can think of the dividend kind of like a little built-in cost of living adjustment. Dividends are never guaranteed, but when they are paid, they do cause, if they are paid back into the policy, they can cause both the cash value and the death benefit to increase, which again can keep pace with inflation, or at least help to do so. But some of the biggest advantages of using insurance policies for final expenses include the following. Number one, insurance policies are certainly portable. That is to say, if you move from one state to the next, you don't have to worry that your insurance policy is not going to pay out. You don't have to worry about whether or not a particular funeral home is going to accept the funds. You don't have to worry about a particular funeral home going out of business. You also have a degree of flexibility that you don't necessarily have with a prepaid funeral plan. So with a prepaid funeral plan, the death benefit would go directly to the funeral home, whereas with a life insurance policy, the owner of the policy during his or her life can specify who the beneficiary or beneficiaries are. So you could split the policy proceeds amongst several people. There is such a thing as a funeral assignment agreement. You could provide that a portion of the death benefit is earmarked for the funeral home, but you need not do so. If a rich relative comes out of the woodwork and ends up paying for your funeral, you don't have to worry that your death proceed then has to go to the funeral home or will be wasted. That proceed then can be paid to the beneficiaries and they can do whatever else they want with it. In other words, the death benefit from a life insurance policy can be used in theory for any purpose whatsoever, any legal purpose. Additionally, whole life policies have cash values that are associated with them, and these cash values are accessible while the insured or while the owner of the policy is alive. So in theory, a person could take back the amount of money that they've placed into a policy, or at least as much of the money they placed that has been accruing as cash value. So the amount of cash value in the policy is accessible, and a person can take that amount back if they change their minds about how they want their final expense plans to go. A couple of advantages here are that once a beneficiary or a set of beneficiaries has the death proceed, they can go with one funeral home or another. They could price shop to try and get the best price, the best value. And any extra money that's not necessary for a funeral expense or for final expenses would then be able to be split amongst your heirs or beneficiaries. But if necessary, the funeral policy proceeds can be assigned to the funeral home directly. Now, some potential negatives with life insurance policies might be, number one, if the company has poor ratings, so you want to be careful to check the ratings of the company that you deal with. Some people might prefer to deal with a smaller company, so when I said earlier that insurers tend to be larger companies versus maybe a funeral home that's a smaller company, some people might see dealing with a smaller company as a potential benefit. I would just caution that it can be a plus and a minus. It can be a plus in the sense that you might be dealing with some family-owned business or some smaller business, but it can be a minus in the sense that you might end up spending a little bit more, and you might risk that if that business concludes or if that company goes out of business, you may have a difficulty getting your money's worth or getting your money back. Now, again, with a prepaid funeral plan, the proceed must be used for funeral costs. Some people might see that as an advantage if, for example, you have some misgivings about whether your beneficiaries are going to use your policy proceeds in the way that you want. But you have a couple of options. Number one, you could have the policy pay into a trust, and then you could have the trust documentation specify what the money is to be used for. The court-appointed or your appointed trustee then would be legally liable for ensuring that the money goes for the purpose that it was intended. You can ensure that through a funeral assignment that the funeral home costs are discharged first before any remaining funds are distributed to whatever other beneficiaries there may be. Also, some life policies include a provision called a spendthrift clause, and this is designed to prevent a person from squandering the death proceed or from using it for some other purpose. Finally, life insurance policies do generally have to be underwritten, which means that you have to be healthy enough to qualify for one. You have to be young enough to. In some cases, prepaid funeral plans might be available to some people who are otherwise uninsurable through a life insurance company, but there are guaranteed issue life insurance policies. So again, I can't give specific advice, but I would tell you at least check what your options are, check the ratings for the various companies that you're attempting to deal with, whether they're funeral home companies or whether they're insurers, and just survey your options. And if you need further advice, consult a lawyer in your area, consult a licensed life insurance professional in your area, and try and at least come to a decision about what payment options are best for you and your family. If something I said today has been valuable to you, I invite you to like the video. Please subscribe to the channel and check back. I will be doing a further couple of installments in this series on final expenses. In the next installment, we're going to talk about the differences, pluses and minuses of using retirement account funds for final expenses as opposed to life insurance policies. Thank you very much.